All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to a live on YouTube using StreamYard. I'm still trying to figure out how this platform works. But if you are new to my channel, then nothing will seem out of place. If you have seen me before, anytime within the last year or so, then I will look shockingly different. I just shaved off my beard today. So apologies for startling those of you who are used to seeing me with that glorious beard, but I needed to give my wife a little break. So it will be back, but for the moment, I'm going to be clean shaven. Hi, Star Wars fan. Hi, Joaquin Diaz Salgado. Hope y'all are doing all right. What is it, Saturday? Yeah, it's Saturday. Ooh. Hope y'all are having a wonderful weekend. Just want to make sure everything's working right. Hi, Baron. I assume that's pronounced. Hope you're doing all right. Looks good with and without the beard. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. My wife, I think, she likes the way the beard looks, but cannot stand kissing me with a beard. Well, not cannot stand it, but isn't a fan of it. Greetings from South Africa. Hope, I imagine the weather's treating you a lot better down in South Africa than it's treating us. It is 34 degrees right now. Pause Jurassic Park, so this better be good. If it's the first Jurassic Park, I can't guarantee it will be better than that. Yeah, significantly less beard than than usual. Apologies for startling y'all. This is how I spent more than half my life. When I was an LDS missionary, I couldn't have a beard. When I was at BYU, I couldn't have a beard. When I spent a decade working for the LDS Church, I couldn't have a beard. So, yeah, this is how a lot of people got to know me. But it's been nice over the last year having a beard, and my beard will be back. So this is just temporary. When can we ask questions? Whenever. Feel free to ask questions, because I don't want to be the one responsible to try to hold up this entire conversation. So, Harlan, you look like yourself. I sometimes I look more like myself than other times. I was going to comment on any of your other videos, but now I'm going to tell you in person. I'm so glad you saw the energy and interest in keeping up your work. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, absolutely. It's my full-time job now, and yeah, it is something that I would do for free anyway if I had another source of income. So happy to keep doing it. And as many people have pointed out, with as much misinformation as is out there, I have incredible job security. So which languages do you speak? The only modern language I would say I can speak and get around in is Spanish, but I can read a lot of German and French and Portuguese and Italian, and understand a good deal of it as well. And then I can also read and write. My speaking is awful. Ancient Hebrew, ancient Greek, Ugaritic, some Aramaic, Syriac, stuff like that. I thought Dan was Santa. No, don't have that much white. Although I have gained a bit of weight. Last year, I was diagnosed with a touch of the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and so I lost like 30 pounds, and it went away. And I've kind of relaxed quite a bit over the last year or so. I've gained probably all of that back. ¿Cómo aprendiste español? Viví 2 años en Uruguay como misionero para la Iglesia de Jesucristo de los Santos de los Últimos Días. No he dicho eso en muchos años, pero sí, viví 2 años ahí, aprendí castellano y hablaba en voz, y regresé a Texas, en los Estados Unidos, y todos fueron de como Cuba o México, así que tenía que cambiar mi acento. Pero hace mucho que no hablo regularmente, así que estoy, no sé si es un dicho en español, pero estoy fuera de práctica. Así que tengo que hablar más. Y quiero crear más content en español, pero lleva más tiempo para hacer un video en español porque tengo que verificar que estoy diciendo todo correcto. Do you understand modern Greek as well, or just the old? I supervised a modern Greek translation of the LDS scriptures for almost 10 years, so I can get around in some modern Greek, but I understand the ancient much better. Dan, does the death and resurrection of Jesus line up with the Old Testament prophecies? Judaism seems to teach otherwise. I would say that the New Testament frames the death and resurrection so as to represent fulfillment of Old Testament prophecies as they were understood in that time period. But that time period was first century kind of Greco-Roman Judaism. So they interpreted the prophecies much differently from the way that Judaism has historically interpreted them, and much differently from the way scholars understand them now, particularly because they were interpreting everything through the light of the Septuagint, the ancient Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. So there are times when the way Jesus is being represented is very clearly intended to say, look, he's fulfilling this prophecy, even if they have to tweak things a little bit. A good example of this is the triumphal entry in in Mark and Luke. Jesus is just riding in on a colt. But you go to Matthew, who's the one who's the most concerned to represent things as exactly fulfilling Hebrew Bible prophecy, and specifically this prophecy in Zechariah, where it says that the king will come riding on a donkey, or what is it, a colt, even the foal of an ass, or something like that. I forget exactly what it is, but it is appositional. But Matthew evidently misunderstood things and was like, 2 animals, all right. And so Matthew actually describes Jesus riding into Jerusalem simultaneously astride 2 animals at the same time. So that is retelling the story so as to make it fit the Hebrew Bible prophecy better according to their understanding of it, which was not a great understanding of it. So there are a handful of places where we can see that kind of bubbling to the surface. Contenido. Por supuesto. Sorry. Contento. I knew it wasn't contento, but it's been so long since I've had to use that a word like that. Move to Ecuador, get a local girlfriend, and you'll be back. My wife might have something to say about that. This person shaved Dan's beard. Then add German and some French, and you can get around when I travel much better than most single language folks. Yeah, it is nice to speak other languages. I remember when I was I just graduated high school. I spent a summer in Germany and Austria and Slovakia, of all places. And I was in Slovakia, and I was trying to forget what I needed help with, but I was in a gas station, and there was a Chinese woman, and she didn't speak English. I didn't speak Slovak, but luckily we both spoke Spanish, so we were able to communicate with each other in Spanish. Did the Hebrew language distinguish between fish and whales? What swallowed Jonah? Jonah just says a great fish. They would use a different word for whale, but yeah, it's just a great fish. Although the sex of the fish changes. It's referred to using male pronouns and verbs in one part, and then female pronoun and verbs in another. Hey, Dan, do you think there is a manuscript tradition relation between Mark 16 serpent handling and Acts 28 Paul at Malta and the snake? It's possible. I have not looked into that. So yeah, I don't want to make a judgment about that because I don't know what kind of discussions are out there, but it's certainly possible. Malta is another wonderful. My Maltese is awful, but I've been to Malta several times, and one of the coolest places I've ever visited. Hebrews 1:8-10 is God calling Jesus God. No, and let me pull up the. So Hebrews 1 is quoting a bunch of things from the Hebrew Bible, and this is a quotation from I believe it's Psalm 45. Or no, this one is that's Psalm 110, which is Psalm 45. I think that's Psalm 45. Hang on a minute. Hang on. That's Psalm 2. That's Deuteronomy 32:43. I don't know. Let me pull up Psalm 45. Yeah, that's Psalm 45. So Psalm 45 is explicitly about David, or a Davidic king. In fact, it says in verse 1, so this is from the NRSV, I address my verses to the king, specifically the Davidic king. And then it goes down, and verse 6 says, your throne, O God, vocatively referring to the king as a deity, which is not unusual. There are other places where the king is referred to as a deity. And so the author of Hebrews is drawing on this deification idea. But unto the Son he saith, and then quotes the Greek translation of Psalm 45. And this is God speaking to the Son, calling, well, let's see, I think Hebrews is representing this as, Hebrews is representing this as God saying to the Son, thy throne, O God, is forever and ever. But this is just an example of how God does not necessarily mean God the Father or the God of Israel, but just a way to refer to an entity as divine, as a deity. And we still don't have monotheism as we understand it today by this time period. So it's not, calling someone God or a God does not mean it has to be God the Father or the God of Israel because no other gods exist. That concept didn't exist yet. And in May, I've organized with a couple of friends a conference that's going to be taking place at Brown University called The Meanings and Ends of Monotheism. And the idea is, why is monotheism not a productive analytical framework for looking at the Bible? So we're going to be live streaming that. I'll have more information on that in the future. But if you want to know why more and more scholars every year are convinced that monotheism is not anywhere in the Bible, you'll want to pay attention to that conference. Did you use divine intervention to help try to turn around the Broncos season from where it started? Actually, as soon as I started ignoring the Broncos and just wrote this season off, that's when they won like 5 in a row. So, and then I watched the last game that they just lost. So I think I have to ignore the Broncos for them to do well. Yes. Do we have to super chat to ask questions? No. In fact, I don't even know how super chat works. So I'm a newbie when it comes to the live stream stuff. I just say go live and I go live, and I'm sure there are lots of fancy things that I could do here, but I haven't learned those. Can you discuss the conflation of Adonai and El? Hero Israel, Adonai and El are one. Well, it doesn't say Adonai and El are one. It says Adonai our God, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. So Adonai, our God, Adonai is one. So the original patron deity of the nation of Israel was probably El. Israel means may El contend, or El contends, or something like that. We have no whiff of any deity named Adonai until the middle of the 9th century BCE. And we do have a reference to a place name that is not YHWH, but YHW, like Aleph, according to the Egyptian transliteration from, we have 2 inscriptions, one from Soleb from the end or from the beginning of the 14th century. No, yeah, 14th century BCE, and one from Amara West, that's like middle of the 13th century BCE, and they talk about the land of the Shasu, or the Shasu land, comma, or namely Adonai. And this is probably the name of this land prior to the shifting of that name to the name of the deity. I and many scholars think that Adonai was probably imported into the Northern Hill Country by a migrating group of Shasu people and was incorporated into the Israelite pantheon, probably somewhere in the second tier, so among the B'nai Elohim, which is probably preserved in Deuteronomy 32:8, where it refers to Elyon dividing up the nations according to the number of the B'nai Elohim, the children of God, and Adonai's portion is his people, Jacob his share of the inheritance. I think on the surface, this plainly means that Adonai is receiving one of these nations from Elyon, which would distinguish Adonai from Elyon. And I would say that probably somewhere between 1900 BCE, you have a king who rises to the throne, who probably is a devotee of Adonai or decides to adopt devotion to Adonai, and begins a campaign of conflation to create Adonai Elohim, or to identify Adonai with El. And there's a lot of different scholarship on that. A couple of good books. Ted Lewis's book, The Origin and Character of God, talks, this is from, I think, 2020 or 2021. 2020, yeah, but this is over 1,000 pages. This is gigantic, but this is going to talk at length about the two different concepts of the deity. Daniel Fleming's book, Adonai Before Israel, Glimpses of History in a Divine Name, is a good discussion of those inscriptions from Egypt. You can see one here talking about the Shasu, talking about where they most likely came from, talking about how they arrived in Israel. That's a great new book as well. Robert Miller II published a book called Adonai, Origin of a Desert God. And this one is really leaning into the Midianite Kenite hypothesis. So whereas Fleming says this group of Shasu people probably comes from deeper in the Arabian Peninsula before the rise of Midian and the Midianites, Miller says, no, it's Midianites. Let's take a look at all of the archaeological data for the Midianites and suggest that there's this temple that was probably dedicated to the Midianite version of Adonai. So that's another book that talks about that. This is an edited volume, The Origins of Yahwism, that incorporates a lot of great papers talking about things like the name Adonai, where it comes from. This is Joseph Troper. This is an English translation of a German article that he published a long time ago, talking about how we get the name Adonai. There's iconographic. There's a paper on iconography and stuff like that. So that's another really good edited volume. And then Mark Smith is the godfather of this discussion. And I really like his book, Origins of Israelite Monotheism Origins of Biblical Monotheism is a great discussion. This one is from more recent God and Translation, Deities and Cross-Cultural Discourse in the Biblical World. This is another one that I'd highly recommend. All right. Can you recommend any good critical commentaries on the Book of Mormon and other texts from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Critical commentaries? Ooh, there are not a ton. This is probably the best you can do right now, the annotated Book of Mormon. So this is from Oxford University Press. This is the same series from which we get the New Oxford Annotated Bible. So Greg Hardy is the editor of this. Greg's a good friend and a wonderful Book of Mormon scholar. So there's the text, and then there's commentary at the bottom. And this is just from within the last year, 2023 copyright date on this. So this is a good one. if you are looking for something on the Book of Mormon. Do you think there's more flagrant misinformation today than in recent years? Why is it so appealing to people? I think the internet has, yes, contributed to more misinformation. I think our society is becoming more polarized, particularly as the right wing digs in its heels to try to maintain its grip on power, as a majority of people are rejecting those ideologies, and misinformation is one of the easiest ways to do that. I think a lot of people like to feel like they have secret insider information that a lot of people don't have, which is why we have all these, Anunnaki, alien, Enoch folks out there trying to spread all that misinformation. It makes it feel like privileged information, and so it makes people feel like they have something that most people don't have. Guten Abend aus Österreich. Guten Abend. I was in 1999. My brother and I rented some bikes in Passau, and we had to be in Vienna in 5 days, I think. And we talked my grandmother into letting us just rent some bikes and get some saddlebags and some tents and just ride bikes all the way across Austria along the Danube. And to our surprise, she was like, "That's a great idea. Here's some money. Here's some saddlebags. There's some bikes. Go." And had the most awful and most wonderful time of my life riding bikes with my brother for several days along the Danube from Passau all the way to Vienna. It was so much fun. October, we were in Europe. I was hoping to get down to Austria, but because of the Eurostar schedule and where we needed to be and stuff like that, it wasn't gonna work for us to make it all the way down to Austria. So we stayed in northern Germany. But yeah, I need to get back there. It's such a lovely area. I was back there. I was in Austria. Last time I was in Austria was when they were still transitioning between the shilling and the euro. So that was fun. Prices were, if you go in a shop or something, there were prices in both forms. And so people would try to figure out how they could save the most money. And then we went into Slovakia, and they were still using the Slovak crown. They weren't on the euro yet, and everything cost 10% what it costs in Austria. What do you think about Duolingo? If you stick with it, I think it's a great tool. Incredibly helpful for learning to speak languages. I don't think it even has anything on ancient languages. How much colder is your face now? Well, I have I just got I think it's a baklava or something like that. I think that's what it's called. But so now I have that to protect me when I'm out in the cold, now that my beard is not doing it. When can we expect the next edition of the NRSV? Well, the updated edition just came out about a year ago. The 6th edition of the New Oxford Annotated Bible should be out within the next year or two, and that should incorporate the updated edition. I have a couple of friends who worked on editing some of the books from that who said they've turned in their stuff, and so it's in production now. So I don't know if everybody's turned in all their stuff, but at least they're done with it. Can you explain John 2:4 when Jesus says, "Woman, what do you want with me?" Was Jesus being rude to his mother? I've seen people argue both sides of that. I'm not an expert in that feature of New Testament Greek, but it seems to be if not rude, kind of curt. So I think there's an acknowledgement. There's a little bit of a arm's length treatment there, based on the discussions I've seen. Are you having barbaric anxiety? No, I only have anxiety if I'm on an airplane. Can you talk about the general moral ethic of Job? Job is basically, it's the problem of evil, why do bad things happen to good people? The original story was probably this frame that we have, where we have the Satan doing this bet with God to take everything away from Job. And it kind of, it gets resolved in the end according to that story. But then we probably have this later introduction of all these friends coming in, and then the fourth friend who's nowhere mentioned, who just kind of pops up out of nowhere at some point. That's probably another literary layer. But as we have it now, the story is basically, it's not up to us to question God. We just roll with the punches and accept God's will. It's not, but then the whole, you get everything back in the end is probably an earlier perspective that was not quite as cynical as the other. Elway or Manning? Elway, all the way. I haven't seen. I never saw Manning try to dive for a first down and get helicoptered around and still get up and be able to hand the ball off to Terrell Davis for a touchdown to go ahead in the Super Bowl. What are your thoughts on the work of Dr. Dennis MacDonald and the idea of mimesis between Greco-Roman lit and the stories of the birth of Jesus, his resurrection / translation, and apotheosis? I think there's definitely an element of resonance in the way that the gospel authors are framing and telling the story, and some of the traditional stories about deities and divine men and stuff like that. The notion that it inspired it, that's the origin of it, I don't think that's supported by the data, and that's rejected by the overwhelming majority of scholars. It doesn't look like you've enabled super chats. Visit your monetization settings and start making money. I'll have to look into that. I don't know what. I have not seen. Well, wait. I've seen monetization settings, but I didn't see anything on. Supers. Super chat, super stickers, and super thanks. Give fans new ways to support you. Okay. Accept. Thank you for letting me know. I don't think I ever would have known about that. I don't know what all this is going to do, but super thank you for letting me know about that. Yeah, I think you need a certain amount of subs to be eligible for super chats. I am sure I have enough subs for that. So it looks like, it looks like that's working now. So maybe next time I go live, it'll be something that's on. What's your process for picking which of the many thousands of idiotic videos to rebut? It's got to be exhausting. It's mainly folks tagging me in these videos. Initially, I would try to seek out videos to respond to, and mostly on TikTok. And TikTok's search function is awful, so it was a pain. It was very, very difficult. But then I started getting tagged in videos, and now I get tagged in hundreds of videos every day. And so I kind of have my pick. There are days when there's juicier stuff than other days, but mainly it's people tagging me in other videos. Although there's this dude who talks about like Odin and Loki and all these guys, and the apples of Idun and all this as the inspiration for the biblical story. And I am 90% sure he's not being serious, but I get tagged in his videos literally every single day. And I think I've responded to one time where I was just like, I don't think this guy's being serious, but here's why this doesn't work. If we could find an idol from before the development of Hebrew, would we have any way to recognize it as Adonai? The name Adonai, like if it had a name on it, we would be able to recognize the name, even if it was pre-Hebrew, because even Canaanite back into Egyptian from hundreds of years before the development of Hebrew, we can recognize the name. There were probably the standing stone that was in the Holy of Holies in the Judahite temple at Arad almost certainly was dedicated to Adonai, was identified with Adonai. But that's not that's after the conflation of Adonai and El. So yeah, we would be, if there was a name associated with it, we would be able to tell. If there's no name associated with it, it would be incredibly difficult to identify it positively as representing or indexing Adonai. Kuntila's root inscription is kind of an idol. Yeah, I talk about that at some length in my book, Adonai's Divine Images, A Cognitive Approach, and even have I have a drawing that I did of the inscription. There it is, or the drawing. So this is the Kuntila's root drawing and inscription. If you see, where's my finger? There we go. There's an inscription over here that that says blessed by Adonai and by Asherah. So, but that is also probably post conflation of Adonai and El. Late to the party, and this has almost certainly been addressed, but what happened to the beard? I shaved it today. Little early Christmas present to my wife. It's been almost a year. She was getting a little annoyed, so I'm going to leave it off for a little bit, but the beard will be back. Thank you for the kind words, Haley. I appreciate it. And I'm very happy to hear that that my work has been helpful for you. Bring back the beard. Yes, I will bring back the beard. Did you read the theory about Hashem being a deity linked to metallurgy? Yes, that is Nassim Amsalag's theory. In fact, I think he just, if I'm not mistaken, there's a book that either just came out or is about to come out that is kind of the summarizing all that. Yeah, Adonai or Israel, Nassim Amsalag. I'm just gonna take 1 second and see if I can maybe access that book. What is it called again? So yeah, that the Amsalag's theory is that it is. Is that it? Woo! Yeah, I have institutional access to that book, so I'm gonna have to read that. Let me just sign in here. The theory is basically that Adonai was, and it's an innovation on the Kenite Midianite hypothesis, that Adonai comes from the south, an area of a lot of volcanic activity, and so Adonai is associated with serpents, with volcanoes, and with metallurgy. And that is actually the book that I pulled out a minute ago, Adonai, Origin of a Desert God, by Miller, that talks about that as well, about metallurgy, about Cain and the Kenites being associated with metallurgy, and that being the mechanism for the transmission of Adonai from Midian up into the northern hill country. And now I need to download all these PDFs. Select all, download PDF, confirm. All right, there it is. Close that. Sorry, just give me a second. I'll as soon as I've got this saved, then I will. Yep. Okay. Please forgive me. How close do you think the historical David is to the OT David? And what's your favorite Batman movie? Ooh. I want to say Christian Bale's first go was phenomenal. I liked the Batman. I had some things I was disappointed with, but I really liked aspects of the Batman. But yeah, the Dark Knight, I think they did the best. How close do you think the historical David is to the OT David? Not incredibly close. I think David was probably a warlord who came down to Jerusalem and started up his own chiefdom down there, something like that. And all these stories later accreted to the tradition. There are two good books on the historical David. One is by Joel Baden, and the other is by Jacob Wright. And I don't know if I have. Well, I have them, but I don't know where they are, so I can't show them to you. But I think Jacob Wright's is probably the better of the two. How do you receive Schmid's work on the patriarchs coming from one tradition and the Exodus from another before being combined, harmonized? I agree with Conrad. Moses, what is it? Genesis and the Moses? Excuse me, sorry, something happened to my eye there. I think it's... Where did it go? I thought it was called Genesis and the Moses story or something like that. The heck did it go? Yeah, there it is. Genesis and the Moses story from 2010. Very, very Israel's dual origins in the Hebrew Bible. Pretty technical discussion. He also has this collection of essays called The Scribes of the Torah, the formation of the Pentateuch in its literary and historical context, that I think is very good. And then The Making of the Bible is another book by Schmid and Jens Schroeder, which is a translation from German. Also, I thought it was more of a popular book, but it can be quite technical as well. And I don't know if that's an artifact of the fact that it's being translated from German or what. But I think Schmid is one of the best out there right now working on composition of the Pentateuch. The beard was raptured. Nice. Did the concept of pre-existence exist in pre-Christian Judaism? There's an argument to make for that, but we don't really know for sure. There's a suggestion in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I think, I don't know if it's in the Songs of the Sabbath Sacrifice or where it is, but it talks about being endowed with a good spirit or something like that, which is suggestive of the idea that there are these spirits that pre-exist and they get assigned to physical bodies or something like that. So, and that would fit a little bit. We see it a little bit in early Christianity. We see it in Origen, the idea of pre-existence, which is kind of a Platonic take on things within Origen. So it's very early in Christianity. It probably had some circulation within pre-Christian Judaism as well. Can you recommend any resources for the history of the doctrine of inerrancy/infallibility? There's I think I would say where did it go? Why can't I think of his name? Pete Enns. Pete Enns has written great stuff on inerrancy. There was, I thought I had this book. There's a book called Set and 5'7". It's like 5 takes on inerrancy or 7 takes on it. I forget exactly what it's called. It's basically a collection of essays from different scholars from across the spectrum of ideas about inerrancy, just kind of getting in a little mini debate for this book. I thought I had a copy of it, but I don't know where it is. But Pete is one of the folks engaged in that debate. So anything by Pete Enns will be good. Anunnaki are passé. The Igigi are in now. So hot right now. You live near Passau. Very cool. Such a lovely area. Originally a Washington State lad. As in lived in the state of Washington or went to Washington State University, which is kind of in the middle of nowhere. But very cool. Yeah, that's a lovely area. I want to get back there. On what basis do scholars say there's a historical basis for the Exodus story? In his recent book, Conrad Schmidt says Moses was in all likelihood a historical figure. Which recent book was that? I think the making of this one is probably his most recent book, but this is from 2021. There are a handful of arguments. I think the one is that the name Moses doesn't make sense unless it is a fragment of an earlier Egyptian name that included a divine name, a theophoric element that was removed because of embarrassment. That is one argument, that there was some kind of historical Moses. Certainly didn't have anything to do with the way Moses is presented in the existing Exodus tradition. There's a book. There is a book. Okay, there. I got. There's a book called Israel's Exodus in Transdisciplinary Perspective. And it is edited by Thomas Levy, Thomas Schneider, and William H.C. Propp. The subtitle is Text, Archaeology, Culture, and Geoscience. And I think that probably is one of the best discussions out there right now about the different features of the Exodus tradition and what aligns and what does not with historicity. Baklava. Okay, yeah, that's what it's called. Am I that far behind on the comments? Yeah, baklava is the food, the oily food that I have never really enjoyed that much, except for the pistachios. If you look like Woody Harrelson in Natural Born Killers, I have gotten that for many, many years. Was there really an Ark of the Covenant? And if so, do we know where it is today? I am one of those scholars who thinks there probably was an Ark of the Covenant, but it probably originally was a model shrine. So it was a miniature temple that housed miniature divine images. There are other theories that it has something to do with an Egyptian bark thing that was carried on staves. There are other theories. What we have now in the text is probably a much later reinvention of the form and function of the Ark of the Covenant. But the Ark narrative in the beginning of 1 Samuel, that probably is probably the closest we get to a historical Ark. And there it is functioning precisely as a divine image. What platform is he streaming on besides this? Well, I'm on YouTube, but I'm using StreamYard to curate everything. How much of the story of Paul in prison in Rome and speaking before King Agrippa is likely historical? It's probably fairly historical. I don't know that we have a reason to doubt much of its historicity. Apart from maybe you almost convinced me to be a Christian. He is not reading this chat. If that's about me, I'm just now getting to this part of the chat. This is one of the problems with my live streams is I spend 5 minutes waxing idiotic about some question, and then I get hundreds of more comments in that time period. Is there a good case to be made for Yahweh being a possible pronunciation for the divine name, or is it settled that Adonai is the only correct pronunciation? I don't think there's a good case to make for that. But that book that I shared, The Origins of Yahwism, that paper by Joseph Troper, I think points out what it likely originated as, with a few different regional variations, where the EH on the end is, according to his theory, is a case ending. I don't remember exactly what case he says it is, but it would have been shorter originally, according to him. Oh, looks like we got a super chat of my first super chat ever, John of New. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. John of New reminds me of John From, ye old John From cult. You have any book recs for Islamic criticism? I do not. I get asked about that all the time, but that is not in my wheelhouse, and I would not know. Although I do know about a decade ago, there was a study Quran that came out that was considered to be pretty good. 2015 is when it came out. The Study Quran, a new translation commentary, published by published by Harper One. That's really the only thing I can recall about that. There was something that was published within the last 10 or 15 years on textual criticism. Let me see if I can pull that up. Textual criticism and Quran manuscripts by Keith Small, and that is from 2011. That's another thing. That's the closest I think you're going to get to higher criticism of the Quran. I am getting pinged here. Who was the worst at apologetics, and how long have you felt it was Charlie Kirk? The entire time. I'll be writing a PhD dissertation soon. Congratulations and condolences. I always ask professors and educators for their tips or insights to get through the writing process. Got any? Don't do what I did, which was have a full-time job and a family, and try to write the dissertation in between all of that. Writing a little bit every day helps. One of the things that I did was when I got sat down to do a chapter, I would just try and get as much as I could down, just try to complete a thought, just try to complete a chapter, and then I would set it aside and I would then try to rewrite it, where I was just the things that I remembered that stuck out to me were the things that got written down the second time around. But that usually helped me to organize my thinking and to get rid of what was superfluous and put things in a more accessible framing. And I would do that sometimes 3 or 4 times over the course of writing a chapter. And the goal was to reduce it, make it easier to understand, make sure the most important points were there. That's what helped me. I've heard a lot of people say write a little bit every day, and there were times when I was able to do that. There were other times where I spent 4 months without having written a single word. So you got to find what works for you. Does your beard being gone have anything to do with Mormonism? No. Just got a calling into the bishopric? No, and I wouldn't shave it if they called me into the bishopric. I am currently in the ward council, and they've had no problem with my beard. Oh, thank you very much, Shane. I appreciate it. Another super chat. I'm going to have to, if I had known about this, I would have done this a lot earlier. But thank you so much. And I'm glad that I could help out with new perspectives on the Bible. At Daniel Wallace, are you talking to... Is Daniel Wallace here? Have you ever thought about making more long-form content? I think you could make some really great quality content if you do 30-plus minute videos. If you're interested, get in contact. I do need to do that. So when I first started my YouTube account, my goal was to make longer form content that was native to the YouTube environment. And it was the learning curve was just too steep for me. And I kind of retreated to just cross-posting content from TikTok. And so the stuff that you see of mine on YouTube is all cross-posted from TikTok and Instagram, which is an issue. I need to get over that learning curve. I need to be able to figure out a way to scale my production process so I can do stuff native to the YouTube environment that's 20, 30, 40 minutes long. Because, yeah, I do think there would be quite an audience for it. But I am going to be working with Andrew Mark Henry, hopefully in this coming year on some projects that will be more closely related to that. So that will be an opportunity to get some reps under my belt. I learned Koine Greek in 8th grade at my local Christian school. Wow, that's pretty cool. I'm 26 now. How do I relearn ancient Greek? I would say get your Novum Testamentum Graeci, whatever version you have, and read a little bit out loud from it every day, because you should still be able to pronounce stuff. But if you read a little bit out loud every day, you're going to hear correct Greek, or at least correct for this corpus. You're going to get better at pronouncing it. You're going to get more fluent at reading it, and your vocabulary will improve, because the thing about your memory is it only lasts for so long. If you learn a vocabulary word, it's going to last for so many days, and then you're going to forget it. But if you're reading every day, you're not only going to be seeing a lot of that vocabulary repeated, and so you're going to reinforce that memory, but you're going to be adding more and more to your memory bank. And so reading a little bit out loud every day is what I tell students who are learning, who are taking Greek or Hebrew from me. That is the best technique for picking it up and for reinforcing it. What do you like to do besides Bible stuff? I like to draw. I used to do a lot of artwork as a side hustle. This is a charcoal portrait of my wife and me that I did. This went on our engagement announcement and invitations. I did the cartoon caption contest cartoons for Biblical Archaeology Review for a couple of years. So I've drawn for a long time. I love to play golf. That's my favorite sport in the world. I spend time with my kids. We love movies and TV and board games and trivia and stuff like that. So, and I love to fish. I grew up bass fishing in the South and the East Coast, then moved to Colorado when I was in high school and picked up fly fishing. So I've been doing that for a long time. I love that too, but I don't really have time for it much anymore. I've been fly fishing maybe 3 times in the last 5 years. So need to get back to that. What do you think about the Nicene Creed as a standard for Christianity? I mean, what are you going to do? It is what it is. I think it is more an attempt to force unity on an institution than it is an attempt to actually try to determine what the the original authors and audiences understood by the texts. But they're also imposing this presupposition of univocality. They're trying to come up with a philosophical framework that can work for the whole thing that is philosophically defensible. And then you have the emperor saying, cracking his whip, saying, figure it out. So, what's your opinion on Jesus committing a crime when trying to get rid of the money changers in the temple? Would that have been a crime? I don't know. It depends on what legal system, because within the temple, they shouldn't be, according to the perspective of the authors and of Jesus, they were violating the standards of the temple in the first place. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't thought about that. That's an interesting question. Is Mary then a stand-in for Asherah, or just a Zeus-like romance for Adonai? I don't think Mary's really either. I think in later traditions, there's some merging with earlier traditions, particularly like with Isis and Horus. You have the depiction of Isis holding the baby on her lap that gets picked up with some of the Mary imagery in like the 5th, 6th century CE. So I think you have some merging like that, but I don't think that Mary originates in any of those traditions. Hello, Dr. Dan. I just wanted to say that your work is helping me recover from a lot of religious abuse. Thank you. I'm very happy and humbled to hear that. I appreciate you sharing that with me. And I'm glad to hear that it's helpful. Since only Noah's family survived the flood, who wrote about it and when? The flood tradition is probably a much later literary creation that was inserted into this story about Noah that probably was an etiology for viticulture. Noah was probably the first winemaker. And then you later had this flood tradition come in that was probably written 8th, 7th century BCE, and it's probably adapting some of the earlier Mesopotamian traditions and adopting it to an Israelite audience. So yeah, it was not written by anyone who was a part of any kind of historical flood that also wouldn't have taken place. But in the Kuntilid Root inscription, Adonai and El are mentioned separately. There's one inscription where you have the words El, Adonai, and Baal all mentioned, but scholars debate whether or not these are just different titles for the same deity or actually references to separate deities. And I would probably lean 60-40 at these being different titles for the same deity. What is your golf handicap? Right now, I don't have one. The last time I maintained one, it was 2. I was senior year of high school, and then the first couple of years after high school, when I had a job at a country club, I was about scratch. But right now, it's probably 4 or 5 if I maintain one. Strongest Avenger, beard. Apologetics might not hold up as good rhetoric, but you should apologize for getting rid of that glorious beard. I do apologize. That's I did this for my wife, and I let her know that this is going to upset some people. So, but it was worth it for her. Are you an atheist? I am not an atheist. If so, what was the final straw to make you become one? And concerning beards, Jesus had one, was taken away, and he got it back later. Jehovah's Witnesses did that. I used to be one, atheist now. No, I'm an active member of the LDS Church, but I do not discuss my personal faith or personal religious beliefs on my channel. There are a variety of reasons for that. But all I will say is that no, I am not an atheist. Considering God's monsters, why would oh, and thank you for the super chat. I guess, is that a super chat? Is that super something? Whatever super that is, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Considering God's monsters, why would the biblical authors depict God in such a mean, vengeful, and manipulative way? Was that normal of the culture back then? Does it only seem mean to us today? It was more normal back then. A lot of the gods were considered to be kind of unconcerned with the affairs of people, or to only be concerned insofar as we impacted their own lives. So it's probably leaning a little more in the direction of a deity who has an intimate relationship with this society. Israel is a small society, and I'm of the opinion that that is one of the reasons that their concept of God developed the way it did, was because it was a smaller society. It was not a very large stratified civilization with numerous deities who performed numerous different functions and had different degrees of proximity to their people. So I think the Bible is stepping in the direction of a closer, more loving relationship, but still preserving a lot of the features of a trickster deity, of a deity who is jealous, of a deity who is violent. And we see that still in the New Testament as well. The last thing I want to do is suggest that there is a difference between the God of the Hebrew Bible and the God of the New Testament. There's not. There's historical development the entire time, but we have features of a loving deity and a violent deity in different parts of the Hebrew Bible and in different parts of the New Testament. What are your thoughts on the NASB? Also, thoughts on N.T. Wright's writing on Paul. Not a huge fan of N.T. Wright on Paul. The NASB, I think, strives for literalness, and I think does a decent job of that, but at the same time is a devotional translation and sides with the more conservative reading quite frequently. So I am critical of it in that regard. What's your opinion on John Chrysostom? I don't have a ton of opinions on a lot of the patristic authors. I've read probably more Origen than any other. John Chrysostom, the clearest thing I know about John Chrysostom is he's one of our early witnesses to the idea that Unia was a woman apostle, and he praises her character for that. But other than that, I don't really have strong feelings about John Chrysostom. Where do you pull your views on language and meaning from? Any linguists or philosophers you have in mind? I pull it primarily from cognitive linguistics. That's what I did a lot of my second master's thesis on, and a lot of my doctoral dissertation focused on cognitive linguistics. So there are a handful of folks who've influenced my thinking. Eleanor Roche innovated prototype theory. So different iterations of prototype theory have been influential. I'm not going to pronounce his name correctly, but there's another cognitive linguist who does a lot with conceptual metaphor theory named Zoltan Kovacs. I'm pretty sure I did not pronounce that correctly, but I've read a bunch of that. And then why am I not? I'm awful with names. This is one of the reasons I'm awful on Jeopardy. Like, I know this stuff, but the names, my brain's just like not going to give it to you. Metaphors We Live By, George Lakoff. Lakoff has done a ton of great work, and he's a great follow on Twitter as well. Metaphors We Live By was a very influential book. There are a handful of other cognitive linguists that are influential on me, but a lot of people are like, "Oh, that's so-and-so, and that's Derrida, and all this stuff." And I'm like, I didn't really come to it through philosophers. I came to these ideas through the cognitive science of religion. So I would pretend that I have a more empirical basis for these things. Jokes aside, love your content, man. Your work has helped me a lot in resolving conflicts between my sense of reason and my faith. Ultimately, you've helped me to figure out a framework to keep both. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I appreciate the kind words, and I'm glad that I could help. Can we pitch in and buy you a new bookshelf for all those wonderful books? Yeah, I've got two other bookshelves in my office that you can't see here, but yeah, they are getting full. I have been on a mission to digitize as much of my library as possible, but since gaining some attention on social media doing this stuff, I now am given and sent books all the time. So and now that I have more money, I'm also buying more books. So yeah, I need a better bookshelf situation. Chanukah Sameach. Same to you, Vishanti. Thank you for commenting. Yeah, I've been to some Hanukkah celebrations in the past, but it's been a long time. I need to get back with some friends who celebrate that and who invite me to their celebrations. Thoughts on the neo-documentary hypothesis? I kind of side with the European school. I don't think E and J are full documentary sources. I think they're just fragments that are limited to Genesis. So I side towards talking about D, P, and non-P. Joel Baden, like I'm not about to get into an argument with Joel Baden about the neo-documentary hypothesis, though. He would smoke me. So, but yeah, I did we interviewed Leanne Feldman, The Consuming Fire, the complete priestly source from creation to the promised land. We interviewed Leanne on our podcast, the Data Over Dogma podcast, a couple of months ago. So I forget what episode number it is, but that shouldn't be too hard to find. And she is, I believe that Joel was her Dr. Vater. I think he supervised her dissertation. Yeah, she is, and we talk about the neo-documentary hypothesis in that episode. So that's probably the most detail you'll get out of me on the documentary hypothesis. What's your favorite dinosaur and why? There was a time when I had strong feelings about this, and it was when my daughters were younger and we were doing a lot with dinosaurs. In fact, I had for a few days the I forget where the song came from, but there's a song where you sing the alphabet and you have a dinosaur for every letter of the alphabet. I had that memorized for a little while, not anymore. But my 6-year-old's favorite is Stegosaurus, and I think the Spinosaurus is probably my favorite. Would you have preferred Warner Brothers keep going with the Snyderverse, or are you more looking forward to whatever it is James Gunn is going to do? Oh, man. Yeah, I was pretty disappointed with Snyder's stuff. I think James Gunn will make things more entertaining, but at the same time, that formula is so played now. So I don't know. We'll see. What do we know about the 12 Israelite tribes? Is there any evidence that they really existed? There were probably tribes that by those names that existed, they were probably almost certainly not all descended from a single individual. I have, yep. Jason Staples has a wonderful book, The Idea of Israel in Second Temple Judaism, a new theory of people, exile, and Israelite identity, that discusses the tribes. And I have another. And then Andrew Tobolowsky, The Myth of the 12 Tribes of Israel, New Identities Across Time and Space. These two books will go into a lot of detail about how the idea of the 12 tribes of Israel was developed in order to serve the interests of exilic, post-exilic groups trying to reconstruct a past that allows them to insist they all descend from a single group, that they're all part of the same family. That's a way to overcome infighting within the group and say, hey, we're all part of the same family. We need to get along. So I can't explain all those theories in an accessible way myself, but I would highly recommend those books. And Andrew's is probably going to be the more accessible. It is shorter, and I think the writing is a little less technical. Have you considered doing an audiobook of your most recent one? I told SBL Press. So this is an open access book, so they're not making money off of this, much money. So they don't do audiobooks. I told them I would record it for free if they would allow me to disseminate it for free. And they said, we'll have to talk with the publishers and everything, and or the execs with the publisher. And I have not heard back. So they know that I'm available to do it, but it's not my intellectual property for to record and then release. So it's up to them. How does the Septuagint's translation of Hebrew idioms in the Book of Psalms impact our understanding of ancient Israelite culture context compared to the Masoretic text? It is a snapshot of how those idioms were understood at a given point in time, and specifically within Greco-Roman period Judaism, so 3rd, 2nd century BCE. Sometimes it's helpful for us to get closer to what it might have originally meant. Some of those texts are written very close to the time of their translation in the Septuagint. Sometimes they're not as helpful. Sometimes the translators just transliterate. Sometimes they are overly literal in a way that is not helpful, that indicates to us that they didn't really know how to make sense of it either. So they just kind of punted by just translating it as literally as they could. So it's a mixed bag. Are you familiar with David Stern's Jewish New Testament translation and commentary? I don't think I am, although I met David Stern at the SBL's annual meeting. He came to the review panel on my book because he published the review in the Review of Biblical Literature of my book and wanted to come talk about it a little bit more. I'm not familiar with it. I am familiar with the Jewish Annotated New Testament, but that is Mark Zvi Bretler and Amy Jill Levine, if I recall. I don't know if David Stern had a role in that. How do we divide the usage of El as a name and as a generic word for God? Is it based on time period, or were both meanings used simultaneously? Both meanings would have been used simultaneously. There would have been some way anciently that they would have known the difference most of the time. In personal names, there is a theory that if you have a nominal phrase, if you have a predication, that if El comes last, that is being used as a personal name. If El comes first before the verb, that it is being used as the generic noun. It's kind of a guess. But yeah, it's not always clear. All right. So that's my wife calling, and which means it's time for me to go. So thank you, everybody, for your time. I'm sorry that I could not get to all of your questions. Actually, I'm going to have to call her back because I'm not going to get to her in time. Let me just try to get to some of these last few super whatevers before I go. Gracias por todo lo que haces, Dan. Eres un ejemplo a seguir. Saludos desde Perú. Saludos también. ¿Recomiendas algún creador de contenido similar al tuyo en español? Mario. Told you, I'm awful with names. I know. Is it? Let me see if don't want to say the wrong name. Mario Murillo. Mario A. Murillo is someone who makes a lot of great content related to the Bible in Spanish. I'm not sure that he has a formal education in biblical studies, but reads quite widely. Reads quite widely, so I would highly recommend Mario for. In fact, I'll just put it in the. I put it in the chat. That's his name. I think that's what his username is, just Mario Amorillo. Check him out. Why do some think Moses is based off someone real? I mentioned this earlier. It's probably a combination of wishful thinking, but also the name Moses may just be a fragment of an earlier name that was an Egyptian name that would have had an Egyptian deity as a theophoric element. And so that may have been removed out of embarrassment. So there's an argument to make that the name Moses makes the most sense as an actual Egyptian name that was altered because Israelites didn't like it had an Egyptian deity associated with it. That's an argument. Not great arguments. Logos or Accordance? Accordance, hands down, best Bible software. Why? Accordance has a lot better stuff when it comes to the original text, when it comes to resources for the original text. Their syntactical tagging and grammatical tagging and all that kind of stuff is a lot more robust. Logos is better when you want to look at secondary literature. And okay, that looks like everything. Apologies for the abrupt ending. I appreciate your time and attention. I'm sorry I couldn't get to everybody, but I will try to make the live streams on YouTube a weekly event if I can. So thank you everybody for your time and your attention and the very kind words. And I will talk to you all later.